Just a reminder on these really cold days to plug the tractor in at least an hour. If it's really cold, 2 hours before you want to use it. Make sure that the extension cord is plugged in too, otherwise it doesn't do any good. And you want to feel a little bit of heat in the block before you try to start it, because it's going to be hard enough to start being cold anyway. The other very important thing is when you do start it, let it sit there and let it fast idle about 1100 RPM or so. Let it warm up all the other fluids, because the block heater will warm up the block, but that's about it. The hydraulic fluid that lubricates the transmission and does everything else is still stone cold. So before you go driving, before you go revving it up to PTO speed, let it sit there a good, if it's really cold, a good 20 minutes, maybe even half an hour, for the longevity of the machine as a whole. Because when that fluid's thick, it's not lubricating like it should. It's harder on the pump, and you just need to take care of our old girl here. Another thing that's going to hopefully help this tractor start tomorrow in the cold, I'll put the trickle charger on it just to make sure the batteries are nice and charged. Give it all the chance it can get. It's still going to need to be plugged into the block heater for an hour or two. Talked about letting the old tractors warm up when it's cold like this, but pretty much all of our equipment needs some time to warm up. It's especially important with the hydraulically driven things like the skid loader and the RTVs. And this is the RTV handbook, and I don't want to read it all to you, but it's right here that basically says let it warm up. It's not just the motor, it's the transmission. Let it sit there and idle and warm itself up, otherwise you're doing damage. Same thing with the skid loader. The Kubota tractor, it's not hydrostatically driven, but you are protecting gears with the fluid. So, it's good practice to let your equipment warm up when it's cold like this. Makes them last longer, and they perform better. So I'm going to repeat it, especially the RTVs. Don't just jump in it and go. Most of the time I like to have equipment parked, pointed out, so it's ready to go when you need it. In the wintertime, I like seeing the skid loader in. I'm happy to see that it's pulled in this way. And the same as that RTV. That way you can fire it up, let it warm up on its own, and you're not stinking yourself out quite so much in the shed, pointing the exhaust out. So, you can give it its good 5, 10, 15 minutes of idling to warm up before you actually do anything with it. I always gripe about the tracks on the skid loader being packed up with mud, just because from my point of view, if I could work on it, then, it's a pain for me. It is a little bit of a concern when it's going to be, in the single digits like tonight, that when that mud freezes, at least the skid loader is not parked in the mud where the track could freeze to the ground, but it's also just not good for everything to have the mud around everything freezing it together. So we'll see. Hopefully it doesn't need to be used tomorrow anyway.